What's up, YouTube fam? Robbie C here. And more importantly, how's it going, Joel? Are you having a good day? Today we're going to talk about something super important that every disc golfer is going to deal with or have dealt with in their life. And that is wind.
So catch me if I fall.
Sometimes if you sit back and think about it, the game that we play feels a little silly at times. We are trying to take these plastic circular objects that weigh usually 180 grams maximum and throw them across large distances, just keeping our fingers crossed that the wind doesn't absolutely destroy the shot and throw it into the ground or throw it off into some wayward direction that we aren't anticipating or aren't prepared for. Learning how to read the wind in disc golf and learning how to change your disc selection and even the types of shots that you're trying to throw can be paramount. Is that even the right word? Sometimes we like trying to throw big words in there to sound super cool and all that, but we definitely use them wrong. So I'm not sure if that's the right word. Let's go back to the layman's definition. It's pretty super important for us to figure out how to throw the right disc into the right winds and read things correctly. So I want to take a few minutes to go over some simple concepts that you can look at when it comes to reading the wind, because I'm going to say this multiple times throughout the rest of the video. Sometimes even with all the right information, it's still a little bit of a guessing game. Before we talk about reading the wind, we need to talk about the reasons certain discs have the ability to fight the wind. And if you can notice between, let's say, mid-ranges like this Ursus or distance drivers like this Avalanche, you're going to notice a little bit more of a bladed edge on these discs. The bladed edge of the driver allows it to cut through the wind a little more easily, but it also makes it more sensitive to the wind at the same time. Sort of like a double-edged sword, you might think. The rounded edge of the mid-range or the putter is going to make it less sensitive to the wind, but it also isn't going to have the ability to fight through the wind as well, which means that when you're facing strong winds coming at you, those mid-ranges and putters may not be able to get the distance that you were looking for as opposed to the driver. Now, that's not saying that you can't use these slower discs when winds come out and that you only have to use higher discs, because like I said, there's going to be a little bit more variance with this rim in terms of hitting it correctly or incorrectly. The potential for success changes dramatically. But in an effort to keep things simple, I want to go over the 4 major types of winds that you're going to come across and a guiding principle or rule that you should have in all of them. So in breaking that down, we're going to talk about headwinds, we're going to talk about tailwinds, we're going to talk about left to right, and we're going to talk about right to left. These 4 wind directions are going to be our basis, and if you ever find yourself having a combination of the two, then you can sort of carry truths from both of them. I also know some folks are going to say, hey, Mr. YouTube man, are you going to throw some shots demonstrating all of this? Well, just like y'all are searching for that perfect day where the wind's not kicking around, on a day where I'm trying to find wind to play in to demonstrate these concepts, it has been super not windy the entire week that I've been filming these videos. The one major guiding principle of reading the wind and using it correctly is viewing the flight plate of the disc like our childhood hero, Johnny Tsunami. The flight plate's ability to either ride the wind or be rejected by the wind is often going to determine everything about the result of our shot. Thus, our guiding question whenever we're looking at the wind is WWJTD. What would Johnny Tsunami do? Let's start with the most favorable wind for most players, and that's a tailwind. Johnny Tsunami wants to do everything he can to ride the wind. So when the top of the flight plate or Johnny is exposed to the wind, often the wind is going to push down in his face and say, hey, go back home to Hawaii. But he can use that surfing expertise shredding the slopes when he gets the bottom of the flight plate exposed to the wind, which causes it to push even farther. Thus, a tailwind can naturally, when discs are thrown correctly, help the disc go even farther. This is why you'll hear a lot of people question folks on the internet saying, oh, you've thrown this far, was it off a cliff in a tailwind? When utilized correctly, you're gonna get a lot of extra distance out of the flight of your disc because it's going to do 2 things for a disc when thrown in a tailwind. First, when thrown nose down, you notice the bottom of the flight plate is exposed to this wind, which is gonna cause it to push even farther, and it's gonna get there a whole lot faster. The second thing that a tailwind does is it causes your discs to all be a little bit more overstable. For those of you unfamiliar with overstable stable and understable. Overstable means it just wants to naturally lean into the spin that you put on the disc a little bit more. So for a right-handed backhand, the spin you're putting on the disc is naturally going to make it want to go to the left. To counterbalance this, lots of folks will throw understable discs which want to resist the natural spin that you put on the disc, and that internal battle is going to cause it to go a little straighter. That means that if you're throwing a more overstable disc in a tailwind, it's not only going to want to get to the ground, it's going to want to get to the ground even faster. Your understable discs may not have the natural stand up or flip that you're used to because of the tailwind. The reason the tailwind can also be helpful is because if you can get the disc high enough, think about it like a wind stream coming across. Thinking about this tailwind coming across the screen, most often people will try to throw the disc into this tailwind, but if you don't give it enough height, it's kind of like an undercurrent in the ocean where it's going to push you down and never have the chance to really soar. But if you can get the disc high enough and let Johnny Tsunami ride in that tailwind, that's where you're gonna find that extra distance you've always been looking for. So WWJTD in a tailwind, he's gonna grab a more understable disc and put it a little higher if possible, so that way it has a chance to ride the wind. Now your crosswinds, aka left to right or right to left, can sort of be read the same way. It just goes opposite for obviously the different directions. We want to think about the fact that Johnny Tsunami once again wants to ride the wind. So if you have a left to right wind and you're trying to throw these big hyzers with this outside edge down, you notice here that Johnny Tsunami is fully exposed to the wind and he's not going to get to shred as much as he wants to. He's going to be pushed back down to Hawaii, trying to do his thing, getting him off the slopes. However, if you're playing in a right to left wind and you try to throw these big hyzers, it can be very difficult to aim because you notice Johnny Tsunami is primed to ride the wind and maybe he's stepping up to that double black diamond a little faster than he needs to. And that's where you're gonna see these massive carries, especially when we get that flight plate fully exposed to the wind, letting it push underneath. And depending on the severity of the wind, you're gonna see some pretty drastic aim misses because of how much extra it's gonna get that movement. Obviously those rules change if you're playing in a right to left wind and you throw it on a forehand, or you're a lefty and you're doing this, it's gonna push it down, it's gonna ride the other way, but you guys are smart, you get all that. So WWJTD in a crosswind, well, to keep it nice and simple, it feels a little cheaty to say that you wanna throw a more neutral disc, but that can be the case. There are very few people in life, if any, who can throw a disc perfectly straight, natural, flat, all the time. Almost every person out there who is trying to throw these flat options actually either has a tiny bit of anhyzer in their throw or they have a tiny bit of hyzer. Depending on the type of wind, you're gonna wanna lean into whichever way Johnny is trying to fight. If you have a right to left wind and you're trying to throw flat, going more overstable is a bad idea because it's gonna wanna fight into that. And even if you throw it flat, it's gonna bend down a little bit because like we said, that little natural hyzer you may have, overstable is gonna wanna ride that wind a little extra. Knowing that once it turn over, you can throw something understable, and because the flight plate may get up, it's going to be pushed down before having the chance to really burn all the way over. The key in a crosswind is making sure that the flight plate is aimed in whichever direction you want the disc to actually ride. If the wind's moving this direction and you want it to go straight, you can get it to the ground pretty fast by throwing a little bit of a flex line, knowing that it's going to push down rather than fight out all the way. If you're looking for that major sweeping motion in that same wind, pop that flight plate up and let Johnny ride off into Kingdom Come. Bringing us to the most troublesome wind and one that so many people struggle with, and that is the headwind. I don't want to be so bold as to say that if a tailwind, when ridden correctly, gives distance, that a headwind takes away distance. But I will say that a headwind, most often and for lots of people, is going to take a lot of distance off of your disc, simply because with the disc having to spend so much energy fighting through the wind, that what's going to end up happening is it's going to have a little less spin and power to get forward distance as it's fighting for every square inch of what it's trying to do. In a headwind, discs are also going to fly more understable. Because the wind is taking so much power and spin away from the disc, it's going to have the opportunity to sort of resist the path that you're putting it on and be a little squirrely and fight into a new direction. This is where lots of people who, if they've ever faced extreme winds, may or may not have a utility disc in their bag, and avalanche being a great example of this, of something that is so overstable that normally it wouldn't have a lot of shot options for you, but when facing major headwind or facing a lot of resistance, the extra overstability or desire to get to the ground is negated by the discs trying to fight that wind and punch forward. Now, once again, thinking about Johnny Tsunami and what he wants to do, if you have the disc and you throw it 2 nose down, obviously we know from the other ones, it's gonna get pushed down pretty fast. If you have it 2 nose up, that extra wind coming underneath, which already negates a lot of people's distance because the wind is like coming underneath and catching this back edge of the flight plate and slowing it down. And a major headwind, that's gonna happen way more. So some people may say, well, I've thrown a super overstable disc before, Mr. YouTube man, and it still faded out all the way. Well, that was probably because if you throw it 2 nose up, most things are gonna be overstable when thrown nose up. But the real reason I think headwinds hang a lot of people up is because they almost give too much respect to the headwind and they grab too overstable of a disc trying to get that extra resistance. Whereas I think most people would be better off throwing a more neutral to overstable disc rather than just a pure overstable disc into the headwind, because for lots of folks who struggle to keep the nose angle down on the disc anyway, the extra stability that you need is going to be added by you subconsciously throwing a little nose up. So you're going to have some extra wind fighting potential anyways. Now, obviously, I wouldn't suggest throwing a super understable disc into a headwind. So for those of you who have found your max distance in discs like the Diamond and the Sapphire and the Sail, I would suggest going to a very neutral disc rather than even saying, hey, I'm gonna throw my max weight Sail or that max weight 170 carat Sapphire that I have. The natural understability of those discs is going to be massively exposed by the headwind. The WWJTD in a headwind, he's gonna grab a more neutral to overstable disc and he's gonna make sure that he can keep it low. If we keep it too low and we keep that nose down, it's gonna be pushed down very fast and we're not gonna get a lot of distance potential out of it. If we get that nose up at all, as it comes into the headwind, it has the potential to really lift it and send it into weird squirrely directions because it's gonna lose so much of that power and that spin very fast, which is then gonna cause it to not really have any fighting potential left, and it's just gonna get thrown about in the wind like a kite, like this. You guys catching my drift? Now, is this an all-inclusive or comprehensive guide on the wind? No, I wouldn't say that it covers every single little minutia or like little tiny detail of what can happen when you're out there facing the wind. But this simple concept of WWJTD, thinking about the flight plate and how it's interacting with the wind around you, can be a huge game changer just in terms of how you can ride the wind effectively or even resist the wind effectively by getting that flight plate exposed and letting it be pushed to the ground, let's say on upshots specifically. Obviously, when we talk about putting, some of these similar concepts are going to be there, but we'll make a whole video about that coming soon if you guys are interested on reading the wind on your putts. Because once again, like we said at the beginning of the video, even if I covered every single specific detail within absolute certainty, at the end of the day, we are throwing these little circular plastic objects into sometimes some ripping winds. And so we can have some very informed opinions, but there are just going to be moments where it is simply throwing a disc into the wind and seeing what's going to happen. All we're trying to do here is make sure that our odds are a little bit Katniss Everdeen in our favor. So that is going to wrap it up for today's video. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day and that you can make it fantastic for someone else too, especially because hopefully next time you guys are out there and you're feeling super crushed and defeated by the wind, you can embrace the Disney Channel original movie legend, Johnny Tsunami's fight against the tyranny of people who would not accept him as a snowboarder as he climbed the cliff. That's my bad. That was just like, that was intense, but man, what a great film. All right, hope you have an amazing rest of the day. Thank you for watching as always, but for now, we're gonna leave you with the birdie.